All right, friends, welcome back to the Blessed Family Podcast. Today we have a topic for you that I really hope you apply to your family. This is something that our book, Essentials, 16 Tips for Raising Your Children to be Successful, something along those lines. This is one of those 16 essentials, and it's about teaching our children how to be good conversationalists. Conversations are really important. You break down the word conversation and look at the etymology. I think it's very insightful. This is about speaking things into being. This is about ministering to people. There's a book I'm going to recommend at the end. I'll recommend it right now also, called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. It's about a 45, 50-minute read. Man, when we come together to speak with each other, we have amazing opportunities that the vast majority of us completely miss out on. So, this is also a great tool for your children to take dominion. I mean, very often the one who gets the job isn't about GPA, it's about conversation. Very often the one who gets the girl or the girl who gets the guy isn't because of higher education, it's because of how they speak, how they relate to people. And so this is a big deal. I mean, the vast majority of people who have been successful have a knack for this. Even people who have been evil, right? I mean, even people, I'm studying right now this week, Julius Caesar with my middle children, and this is one of his strengths. He was a great orator. He was a great conversationalist, but this isn't about necessarily being an orator. This isn't about public speaking. This is just about how to speak to people one-on-one or in a group setting. So, principle number one, people like to talk about themselves, okay? That's just the way we are. We like to talk about ourselves. Our flesh does. And so the main principle of being a good conversationalist is to let the other person do that and not you do that. If every time your son or daughter gets in a conversation with someone, all they do is talk about themselves, they're going to be typical and they're not going to be extraordinary. They're going to be the norm and not the exception, and they're not going to stand above the rest. So, we want them to obtain the goal for which God created conversation. So let's actually ask that question. What is the goal of a conversation? Well, the goal of a conversation, just like everything else, is the glory of God. But it's through edification and ministry. In a conversation, now this is we don't talk this way anymore, but there are superiors, there are equals, and there are inferiors. If I'm talking to an older gentleman, I am the inferior, and I'm going to talk differently than if I'm talking to a 20-year-old young man. Because in that case, I am the superior, he is the inferior. And if I'm talking to an equal, the conversation's going to go a different way. So this is about ministry, edification, and we need to understand that depending on who we're talking to, it's going to look different. So once again, this is about ministry. This is about, everyone should grow. Everyone should be edified. Whether you're the one giving the ministry, receiving the ministry, everyone should be edified in a good conversation. So tips. You need to be the kind of person that doesn't like to hear yourself talk. You don't want to dominate the conversation. What's very frustrating and just sad, and I feel sorry for these people. And, I've been this person before, and of course I'm not immune to it. I could still fall into it today, but I try to be very, very aware of this, is when you're in a group of 6 people, or 4, or 5, or 3, and there's just one, or 2, and there's just one person dominating the conversation the whole time. And also, next tip, whenever they do speak, they give a lecture instead of a conversation. Okay, a lecture is a lecture. A lecture is one way. You sit down for a lecture, you have the expectation, this is going to be a 20 to 16-minute lecture, one way. And when someone dominates the conversation and then they just go on and on and on, that's not good. Now, are there exceptions? Of course. Let's say that you're mentoring someone. It would be very appropriate for the superior to talk a little more to the inferior. But of course, they're going to be asking questions, right? Actually, that's a great tip right there. Ask good questions. Jesus, when he was 12, he was discovered hiding out. Well, not hiding out, but his parents, of course, you know the story. They were looking for him and they found him. And what was he doing? He was with older men asking questions. So I'm teaching my 12-year-old, almost 13, Job, how to be a good conversationalist. What I'm going to tell him is, hey, when you are around older men, you want to listen, speak little, and you want to ask questions, okay? You want to ask questions. If you're in a group of older folks, you need to talk very little, if at all. You listen, and if you do say something, it needs to be a question. You don't need to offer your opinion in that context. And friends, listen, historically, people got this. Social media, which social media is not a horrible thing, but it does have consequences. We are in an age where young men and women think that their opinions really, really matter. And they want to be heard instead of understanding. There is, for the first third, even to half of your life, depending on the context, well, in certain contexts, your whole life, you need to learn. I mean, you are in a stage of learning. Your opinion doesn't matter. You need to learn. You need to listen. How can you, how can you glean wisdom from others if you're too busy expressing your own view? I think it's Proverbs 18:2. The reference could be wrong, but it says, "A fool does not delight in understanding, but only in airing his opinions." And that is the trap that you don't want your sons and daughters getting into. So if your son or daughter is in a group of older men, older women, they need to listen. Reminds me of a scene from my favorite movie, okay? My favorite movie is Master and Commander. And in there are some young officers that obviously came from very wealthy, noble families, right? And there's one, I think his name's Callum. And Callum is there at the table dining with these officers, and he doesn't say a word. And there's another young man also, can't think of his name, but he ends up losing his arm. He's left-handed, and or left-armed, I guess. And he just listens. But then Callum, at one point, it quiets down, and he speaks, and he says, "Sir, can I ask a question?" And he asks this question, and you can tell from his behavior that he understands that his place in that circle is the student. And so he is going to observe. He's going to listen. This is something you teach your sons and daughters. Hey, when you're hanging out with older men and women, which son and daughter, you need to be hanging out with older men and women, listen to how they speak. Listen to how they converse. See if you can pick out the ones that really understand how to have a conversation. See if you can identify, not in the spirit of being judgmental, but in the spirit of learning, who is dominating the conversation. Observe, learn, and maybe ask a question or two. So friends, the main point in this is teach our children to talk less and to ask questions, and make it their goal either to minister to or be ministered to, depending upon the age and situation of the other person, right? Obviously, for our sons and daughters, the vast majority of their conversations is going to be being ministered to, but with their peers, they need to know how to have a good conversation. This is when you know your children are, by the grace of God, maturing, is when they can have a conversation with a peer and they disagree, but they don't get upset and they respect the other person's opinion and it's okay, right? But this is the epitome of youthful interactions, is getting upset and angry when people don't think the way you think, and we need to move them past that. So guys, this is, the main point of this podcast today is just to inspire you. And like I said, we have a chapter on this in our book, The Essentials, but to inspire you to make teaching your children to be good conversationalists part of your family curriculum, right? That it is a mission objective for your family, to the glory of God. All right, friends, love you all very much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.